The technology we have at our disposal today is incredible. For example, many of you are watching this video on a device you can fit into the palm of your hand, which is connected to the internet. That would have been impossible as recently as just 20 years ago. Our ancient ancestors were no less impressed by the technologies available to them, but their tech looked a little different. Let's take a look. Ancient Roman jewelry of any kind is usually a valuable thing to find for a treasure hunter. But there's something extra special about this beautiful sapphire ring. The sky blue ring, made from a single piece of sapphire, is 2,000 years old, and almost certainly belonged to the famous Roman Emperor Caligula. The piece features the face of a woman etched into its bezel, and historians believe it's the face of Caesonia, Caligula's fourth wife. Legend has it that Caligula thought her so beautiful that he regularly paraded her naked in front of his troops. The circumstances of the ring's discovery are unknown, but it made its world debut at an exclusive exhibition of Roman jewelry in London in late 2019. Because of the quality of the craftsmanship and the precious nature of the stone, it would be valuable even if it didn't have any historical connection. But because of its apparent provenance, it's been given an estimated value of $750,000. If it were ever to be sold, it's highly likely that the price would go far higher than that. Rings made from a single piece like this are known as horoliths, and this might well be the greatest example of its kind in the world. Let's move on to Saudi Arabia with the Al-Nasla rock formation. Looking at these perfectly sliced standing stones, it's hard to believe that they weren't cut in half and then placed onto stone plinths by human hands. In fact, some people believe that's precisely what happened here. If Al-Nasla was taken away from the desert and placed in an art gallery, it would pass for an outstanding sculpture. Nobody knows for sure how long the rocks have looked like this, but the inscriptions that have been carved into the sides of the stones were made around 4,000 years ago. It seems that our ancient ancestors were just as fascinated by Al-Nasla as we are. The cut between the stones is so straight and smooth that we'd struggle to replicate it today using laser technology. But scientists tell us that it's a natural effect caused by millions of years of weathering. It's tempting to imagine that the prehistoric inhabitants of Saudi Arabia had secret stone-cutting technology, but really this is a reminder of nature's phenomenal powers. When, where, and why did human beings start wearing clothes? The answers to at least one or two of those questions might be hidden in Contrabandier's cave in Morocco. There, archaeologists have discovered direct evidence that humans lived in the cave 120,000 years ago and skinned small carnivores, using their skins for fur and then turning their bones into tools that made pelts from the fur. This amazing discovery was first reported in September 2021. This is the oldest known evidence of humans making clothing using tools in the archaeological record. Homo sapiens first emerged a little over 300,000 years ago, so based on this evidence, it appears that they might have been walking around naked for 180,000 years. The curious thing is that historians have long assumed that humans first started making and wearing clothes in cold habitats. But if this Moroccan cave is the origin of the process, that's not the case. None of the clothes that were made here have survived to the present day, because they would all have been perishable. But there's even some evidence that a primitive form of leather might have been made from wild cattle. Must Farm Quarry in Whittlesey, close to Peterborough in England, is one of the richest archaeological sites in Europe. It's even been described as the British equivalent of Pompeii. Countless archaeological artifacts have been found there over the years, but one of the most remarkable is a Bronze Age wheel that was recovered from the site in 2016. Scientists have been able to date the wheel to between 3,100 and 2,800 years ago. It's 3 feet in diameter and has been preserved so well by the silt and mud at the bottom of the quarry that it still contains part of its axle. This is the most complete example of a Bronze Age wheel ever to be discovered in Britain. Other discoveries made at the same time as the wheel included small bowls and jars along with a wooden platter, all of which contain traces of the barley, wheat, pork, and beef that the ancient inhabitants of the land lived off. The presence of the wheel is a strong indication that the people who lived here 3,000 years ago had contact with other communities who lived on drier land and may have traveled to trade with them. Continuing our trip around the world, we now move to China for a discovery that took place in January 2022. If you've been watching this channel for a while, or even if you just have a keen interest in archaeology, you've probably seen battle armor made from almost every material imaginable, from teeth to coconut shells. However, you probably haven't seen armor like this before. It's been labeled fish scale armor, and it's approximately 2,500 years old. The name is a little misleading, as the armor found inside the tomb in Turfan on the edges of the Taklamakan Desert isn't actually made of fish scales. Instead, it's made of more than 5,000 overlapping scales of leather, arranged in a pattern to make them look like fish scales. Experts think that it was imported from the Middle East, and so might represent a rare form of technological exchange between the two territories at that point in history. Armor like this would have been useful because it offers better protection from blunt force attacks than mail armor and is also cheaper to make, but it lacks flexibility and coverage. The Inca were a pre-industrial civilization. That's important in the context of what we're about to tell you, because being pre-industrial means having no access to advanced building machinery or tools. Despite that obvious limitation, they somehow managed to build the ancient fortress known as Sacsayhuaman in Cusco, Peru. The colossal stone blocks that make up the fortress walls have been fitted together so tightly that even now, centuries after they were made, it's impossible to fit so much as a single sheet of A4 paper between them. There's no sign of mortar or any other building agent being used to hold them in place. To add to the mystery, the stones that make up the walls appear to have been cut down to size. Each of them is either a square or a rectangle, and perfectly proportioned to fit the spaces they were required to fill. That would necessitate a type of stone cutting technology of the kind that, as far as we know, the Inca simply didn't have. When the Spanish conquered Cusco, they destroyed a lot of ancient Inca buildings, but they left Sacsayhuaman standing. Even the conquistadors must have been impressed by it. The question of what the people who lived in the Middle East thousands of years ago thought they were doing when they created the Nimrod Lens is unlikely to ever be resolved. The object, also known as the layered lens, has the exact same magnification properties as the first telescope. The difference is that the telescope was an invention of the early 17th century. The Nimrod lens is more like 3,000 years old. Its discovery in the ruins of an ancient Assyrian palace in Iraq in 1850 suggests that it once belonged to someone with great wealth and power, but we have no idea what they might have used it for. We can make a few guesses, though. It might have been a burning lens, used to start fires by focusing the rays of the sun. It might also have been a magnifying glass, which would have been centuries before its time if it was a deliberate invention. Whatever it is, it was built to last. Fashioning a lens like this out of rock crystal made it robust enough to stand the passage of time, so people will still probably be studying it and trying to work out why it was created another 3,000 years from now. Let's return to the technology of the Inca people of South America. Water was sacred to the Inca. They viewed it as both a physical phenomenon and a spiritual concept, and they treated it with respect. That's why they built the Inca Temple in Ollantaytambo in Peru to give thanks to the gods who provided them with water, and it's an astonishing spectacle of hydraulic engineering. Water flows through the fountains of the temple even at 9,000 feet above sea level, thanks to a canal system that extends for several miles through solid rock, extending into the four main basins of the Paracancha Valley. Working during the 13th century, the Inca devised their temple full of pools, waterfalls, and other water features according to solid hydraulic principles, managing to avoid hydraulic jumps where necessary, and even taking advantage of them in some places. They applied a mysterious coating to the rocks to make them impermeable and prevent leaks, and created drainage channels to counter the effects of landslides and erosion. It would be a challenging project for a civil engineer in the 21st century. How it was pulled off successfully in the 13th is almost unthinkable. Is the Iron Pillar of Delhi an example of steelwork that was over 1,000 years ahead of its time, or a happy accident? Scientists have never been able to agree on the answer to that question, and it's possible that they never will. What can be said with certainty is that the pillar, which is sometimes also known as the Ashoki Pillar, has stood proudly and resolutely rust-free in Delhi, India for 1,500 years. The entire surface of the 22-foot-tall monument is coated in an incredibly thin layer of mesowite, which prevents the iron beneath it from exposure to oxygen, which would result in the formation of rust. Quite how such a technically complex task could have been achieved by the primitive coal furnaces of 1,500 years ago is unknown. Scientists think that it might have been a freak event caused by the iron mixing with slag, lime, and damp air while it cooled. As the people who made it would have had no idea that the rust-proof coating even existed, they'd have viewed it as a miracle. It took several centuries for anyone to come up with a deliberate form of rust-proofing, so either the Indians kept their secrets, or they never intended to rust-proof the pillar at all. The very existence of Nonan Madal is almost a cruel joke played on archaeologists and scientists. It's like it's been placed there to frustrate them. The ancient city was built on top of a coral reef, using ingenious building and architectural skills, and yet we have no idea who put it there. We don't even know when they did it. It might have been 1,000 years ago, or it could be 1,500 years old. The stone that it's made of can't be found anywhere close to it in Micronesia, so it must have been shipped in from elsewhere. That presents us with another problem, because some of the stones weigh 50 tons. Just transporting it would be nearly impossible, and yet it seems that it wasn't only moved, but it was also maneuvered into place without any metal tools. The parts that aren't made out of stone have been fashioned from coral, and each platform of the artificial island has a connected water channel. There's even a sturdy seawall for defense. That makes us wonder how it became deserted in the first place. Were the ancient Romans capable of creating flexible glass thousands of years ago? That seems too absurd an idea to be true, but there are historical records that suggest they could. Both Pliny the Elder and Petronius, two of the most respected writers of the ancient world, claim that the Romans had a formula for making bendable, almost unbreakable glass. Records of the material from lesser-known writers also begin to appear in the time of Tiberius Caesar during the 1st century. It seems that it may have been the emperor himself who put a stop to the production of the product. He believed it would become more valuable than gold, and could destabilize the entire Roman economy. So he decided to pass on the enormous technological opportunities it presented. If the Romans really could make flexible glass, perhaps it had something to do with the steady supply of boric acid they could take from the steam vents of the Tuscan Maremma close to Rome. Adding boric acid to regular glass mixture would make a type of glass that was extremely difficult to break. It still wouldn't have been flexible, but perhaps the Romans knew something that we don't. Some historians believe Archimedes to be the greatest inventor of all time. He was certainly a great military inventor, and is said to have invented a defense system almost like a heat ray that could set Roman ships on fire by using enormous mirrors to concentrate and reflect the rays of the sun. More recent investigations have suggested that he might even have used steam-powered cannons against Roman vessels too. Legends about the Archimedes mirrors first began to appear during the medieval era, with Syracuse said to be the place where they were first tested. A similar weapon is said to have been used in the defense of Sicily against the Romans in the year 214 BCE. no contemporary accounts of the mirror system exist, but modern archaeologists and scientists feel it's possible he could have used hollow clay balls fired from steam cannons powered by Greek fire instead. The Romans would have had no idea where the fire was coming from, so mirrors might have been blamed in the absence of better ideas. Leonardo da Vinci designed a steam cannon in the 15th century and credited the design to Archimedes, so he must have gotten the idea from somewhere.
Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching and see you soon!